Chapter 9. Hooke had overdone it with his call to G-Hop, and as Elodie had predicted, his snakebite symptoms recurred and his eyes quit on him for almost a week. The doc also said there was some permanent damage to his kidneys, which Regents could give a shit about. The constable got himself hooked up to dialysis, morphine, and industrial-grade antibiotics. He wasn't so contrary about bed rest now, as he found he did some of his best thinking while under the influence of narcotics. Also, there comes a point when a man realizes that being pighead just leads a fellow to slaughter. So medical attention it was. And on day 6, Hooke's sight returned and the mask of civility he wore for the general public slipped on account of his dozy state. He opened his eyes, took one look at the nurse, and said, "Shit, Elodie, you done let yourself go." To which the nurse said, "I ain't no Elodie, asshole. She's on the night shift." Regents reckoned that this lady must have been aware of his nature, or she would have been mouthing off. This was a good thing, as the man his cover was intact. He preferred the reputation that preceded him to be one of civic responsibility, so the constable didn't admonish the nurse, as he would have surely liked to do, but instead apologized for his own rudeness, blaming his insensitive comment on the drugs coursing through his system. The nurse didn't look like the least mollified. He treated Hooke to withering glare, the likes of which Hooke would usually reserve for unemployed cheers on cable TV shows. Hooke gave the nurse time to finish her rounds of the small ward, then packed up his gear, dragged on his trousers, one leg at a time, and got the hell out of there. 10 minutes and one signed waiver later, he was in his Chevy and back on the job. Because Regents did have an actual job he was supposed to be doing, while he was clandestinely pursuing his dreams of constructing a metal pipeline up to Pearl, and from there to California and New York City. He was the one and only constable of Petit Plateau, and was 2 years into a 6-year term. What had drawn Hooke to this ward was the vague nature of the qualifications required. An applicant needed only to be of good moral character and be able to read and write the English language. Hooke could read and write just fine, and he considered his own moral character to be in line with his ambitions. Luckily, the constable's office was part-time, so as long as Hooke submitted reasonable expenses and kept up with the justice of the peace subpoenas, he was pretty much left alone. That was an open secret in Louisiana that the office of the constable was a dinosaur from the previous century, which was outrageously exploited across the state by entrepreneurial part-timers who bumped up their expenses to hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars per annum. There was a time when a smart operator could grease the right wheels and hold on to a constable's office for 2 or 3 decades. But with the advent of public expenses, the public was wising up to some extent. It was unlikely to re-elect someone riding the city's gravy train. So a constable's options were to do the job right, or grab as much possible over the 6-year term. Hooke did the job right. He served whatever needed serving, no matter how deep into the swamp it took him, and he claimed the delivery fees and mileage back to his salary. He worked whatever 3 days a week suited him, and did a little enforcement work on the side for Mayor Shine and his buddies in the next ward. And in return, Mayor Shine gave Hooke the use of an office and secretary. Hooke wasn't technically supposed to be doing any city police duties, but constables generally did, and the Petit Plateau residents were glad to have an army man around to break up bar fights or transport the occasional burglar to the slide-out lockup. The previous constable had been the local bus driver, and was said that in local bars that old Derek didn't know how to spell good moral character, never mind possess a bunch of it. So the public was satisfied now with Hooke, who was admittedly a little intimidating, but there had been a vertical drop-off in larceny since he took it upon himself to walk and be around the town in the evenings. And Hooke wasn't a letter-of-the-law kind of guy either, in that he employed a live-and-let-live code. Drunks were generally dropped off at their own front doors rather than locked up, and kids smoking weed were given a swift kick in the seat of their pants rather than giving themselves a record. The townspeople felt safer in their beds, and Hooke's cover was complete. When he cashed out of the army, Hooke had put considerable research into where he would pitch his stall. The current Faraji model had appeared to him, i.e., get into law enforcement and open trade links to other regions. He picked Petit Plateau because it was a gateway to the north through the swamp. Also, he heard this guy Connie through the dark web, a wannabe gangster who was buying up any soldiers on the force. Any force. And paying good money, too. The first thing Hooke did when the city hired him was spend his days off surveilling Ivory's family. So when his hot-headed nephew Vincent got himself thrown to the beatdown joint of a strip joint for pawing the dancers, Hooke was able to step in and defuse the situation, which had got him to a bar stool adjacent to Rogue, which led to an offer from Ivory. So now Hooke had two salaries, plus a sizable nest egg from the military fuel racket he'd gone on in Iraq. That had been a sweet scam which had fallen apart months after Hooke's honorable discharge, resulting in 100-plus enlisted personnel and military officers being convicted for theft, bribery, and contract rigging valued at tens of millions of dollars during their deployment. Hooke had laughed his ass off when the news trickled back to him stateside. Tens of thousands of dollars? Hundreds will be closer to the truth. He wasn't worried that I would ever come back to him. The army had barely scratched the surface, and his involvement was way subterranean and labyrinth. In the negative column, his long-term plans vis-a-vis Ivory's infrastructure had hit a bump. He would need to act of God to dislodge Ivory from his perch at this raid. Where the hell was he supposed to come across one of those? Surviving that hurricane back in Florida was probably as much as any guy was prepared to do for him. Maybe if I hadn't staked Daddy out like a vampire. Still, no use crying over spilled blood. Better to clear his in tray and turn his focus to Squib. Once his sight returned, Hooke was reluctantly cut loose by the hospital. He had to sign a waiver and was told by the doctor that he was lucky to be out so quick, that his heart had been put under considerable strain, and he should take it easy for a couple months. All advice Hooke intended to ignore roundly, because, as fate would have it, Squib had fallen neatly into Hooke's in tray that very morning. He called Laurie from the Chevy to see what was urgent. The answer was, "Nothing much, Constable." The half a dozen papers needed serving. Laurie had already forced down to the college linebacker. Hooke had sworn in as his deputy for $20 a pop. It was money well spent, in Hooke's opinion, and easily earned. In the opinion of the college kid, Duke McClusker, who was known by all in Sutton-Dry as Clusterfuck, on account of how he would fuck a person up if they resisted his subpoena service. The only other matter of any note was a weeks-old noise complaint from one of the Bugene brothers, who lived down the river in a converted train carriage on the bayou. Maybe, Laurie suggested. Hooke remembered someone had been dynamiting catfish down there. It would mean a lot to the brothers if Hooke would have a stern word with the usual suspects. Usual suspects, thought Hooke. I know who's king of that hill. He swung his Chevy around in the general store lot and set its grill towards the river. Hooke drove slow down the Moreau Lane. A couple of things were different from his last visit. There were no spinning wheels this time around. His right hand was pretty close to normal, apart from the compression badge that reminded him of the support tights his mother used to wear. He made a mental note to check if those bandages came in any other color besides nude. He shuddered, then wrenched his mind away from his mother's varicose veins and to the problem of Squib. There were two ways he could pursue this investigation. It was best to settle on one before making his approach. There was a saying Colonel Faraji used to throw about. Softly, softly, catchy monkey. To which Hooke often replied, Shooty, killy, motherfucking monkey. A response which never failed to pain the Colonel, who saw Hooke as his Padawan. But Regents, my boy, what if you wish to interrogate the monkey? Then I'll shoot him in the leg, which Hooke still believed was a valid argument. But for today, he thought that perhaps the softly approach was the right one to take. Regents was fine with this approach, and could put it off easily enough, apart from one thing, or two things to be precise. His eyes. Another quote from Faraji. The eyes are the window to the soul, but not in your case, Sergeant. I see no soul. Hooke had to agree. He sincerely believed that his soul had been excised, or at least forfeited. So his gray eyes were windows to Bedlam. To look into Regent's eyes was to understand that this man's religion was a blend of avarice and chaos. Hooke knew that people found it difficult to hold his gaze. They felt it in him, the deep well of aggression, the boundless need for conquest. Hooke could twist his mouth into a grin and relax the tension in his shoulders, but he couldn't do shit about the eyes. So he brought himself some wayfarers to disguise the animal bloodlust. Hey, it worked for Tom Cruise. Hooke grabbed on Elodie's front window glass to the book screen. He could have just as easily knocked on the door, but he found rapping on windows freaked people the hell out because he assumed that whoever had been knocking on the window had probably just been peeking through it. And most folks' default emotion, when they discovered a peeper, was to feel guilty of their own selves. Hooke liked the interviewees to feel guilty, even the innocent ones. The curtains were closed, but they were threadbare, and Hooke could clearly see Elodie asleep on the sofa bed, face deep in the cushions, the curve of her thigh rising like the swell of surf. And he thought to himself, "Someday, Regent's son." But not today. Even so, he resolved to take it easy on the girl. No need to burn bridges entirely. He rapped again, and Elodie jerked off like she'd been prodded, rolling backwards off the sofa on all fours, an unconscious but practiced move. "There ain't one goddamn thing I'm seeing here that I don't like," thought Hooke. "I know there are finer women who don't need persuading, but Miss Elodie is a peach, no doubt." Inside the lit house, Elodie climbed up along the table leg and stood in place, swaying slightly. "That goddamn woman is asleep," Hooke realized, and gave one more knock at the window. Barely a minute later, Elodie appeared at the screen door. She hadn't needed a minute to shrug on her dressing gown, being that she was still in her late-night duds. Hooke was disappointed. A little slovenly, he thought. A person sleeping in their clothes. That's something I'll have to fix. Still, he kept his professional face on, hiding his eyes behind the wayfarers, hoping the Polaroids reflected the lights coming both ways, so she couldn't see the lasers coming out of it. Not yet, leastways. Elodie opened the door, eyes down in the manner of sleepy people. Hooke's navy uniform trousers with their gold piping were enough to shake half the sleep from her system. "Constable Hooke," she said, taking a barefoot step back, surprised to see him at her door, especially so soon after the snake bite. It was true that he had called on her before, but never out of the blue. "Constable." Hooke approximated a friendly smile. It came out something like a guy sucking on a slice of lemon. "That's 2 constables. Hell, that here makes me captain. Captain Hooke, get." Elodie shook her wedge of dark hair. "It looks like someone acted off the back of her head with an axe," thought Hooke. "I believe she does it herself. Whips too. Guess she only knows that one style." "Oh, I see," mumbled Elodie, rubbing her one eye. "Captain Hooke, like in the book." "Stupid Cajun," thought Hooke. "I like that." "I thought you might find it was a movie," he said kindly, "if you went and looked into it." Elodie blinked maybe half a dozen times, thinking maybe she was still dreaming. "I'll do that. You know, there's no need to come around, Constable. You done thanked me already at the clinic. Maybe you don't remember. You was all drugged up at the time." Hooke held up a hand to stop the flow. "No, Elodie, Miss Moreau, it ain't that. It ain't that at all. I'm here about something else." "About that something else?" said Elodie, placing half her head behind the flimsy protection of the screen door. "I don't think there is anything else, Constable." Hooke knew what Elodie was saying. She had seen him stripped down to the bones personality-wise, and thought now there was no future for them romantic-wise. This surely was a pity. But Hooke had encountered resistance before, and he felt overconfident he could charm his way over that molehill. But not today. Today was for more pressing issues. Hooke casually nudged the toe of his boot into the frame, in case he had to apply pressure to figure out what he needed to know. "Could be I'll end up here for the day. 6 hours shenanigans, 2 hours cleanup, then burn the place to the ground." Hooke always kept that card in his back pocket, which is probably why the telltale glint never left his eyes. Every time he met someone, Hooke was figuring out how to murder them and get away with it, in case the need arose. But this time, it was better to turn the burner down real low. There was an endgame here beyond the usual gratifications. "I ain't here about personal stuff," he said, "though I surely wish that was the case. No, I done had a complaint about your youngin'. Ain't the first time either. Elodie came out completely awake like a switch had been flicked. Everett? He ain't done nothing. The boy promised me. Hooke sighed like it pained him to deliver bad tidings. They promise, don't they? Sun, moon, and stars. But words don't mean shit to boys in the long term. Pardon my language. They's just convenient at the time. Elodie had a bit of fight in her as far as Squib was concerned, her hackles rising even in the face of Hooke. What's Everett supposed to have done? This time, said Hooke, keeping up the gentle tone. What's Everett supposed to have done this time? Because there surely ain't the first time. Elodie squared her shoulders some and her chin cranked over to one side, which the hunter knew, and Hooke knew, was a sign that the lioness was prepared to protect her cub. Well then, she said, the steel in her voice challenging Hooke, what's he supposed to have done this time? Nothing too serious. Just a spot of dynamite on the bayou. Stun those catfish to the surface. Hooke wiggled his pinky finger. He sure got previous experience in that particular area, if not expertise. Elodie gripped the screen door slant tight with one hand, and her entire frame stiffened. And Hooke realized that with that one little gesture, he'd forever blown his chances. It always amazed him how much some mothers actually loved their offspring. Not his, obviously, which is why he found it hard to relate. It's been a while since that incident, Constable, said Elodie. Everett's done straighten up. Boy's working 3 jobs trying to get us out of the hole his daddy done dug. Hooke was interested. 3 jobs? You don't say. Mind running those down for me? Elodie counted down on 2 fingers. 1, the boy has his own graft on the water. Crawfish, catfish, sells to Bodie direct, which is his second port, working the bar and grill, being as Bodie cuts us a deal on this place. Yep, said Hooke, thinking. Cuts a deal, does he? I wonder. Is old Bodie taking his rent in kind? 3, continued Elodie, on her thumb. Mr. Waxman has taken him on as his assistant. He's doing all sorts of chores over there. It appears Mr. Waxman likes to love about mostly, and he has Everett keep up his house. My boy has spent every hour the Lord sends on the water. Won't even take the Sundays off for himself. He's a good son, Constable. Lord knows he sinks a beer on occasion, but that's all he does these days. He swore to me, and I believe him. I ain't breaking my back to throw away on bail money and medical fees. Hooke tipped his cap back to the crown of his head. That's a pretty speech, Miss Elodie. You surely have a way with words. Truth makes its own way, said Elodie, shifting 1 foot back like she was trying to end this conversation. That's all as may be, said Hooke. Unfortunately, I have to see your complaint, and I gotta check it out. So if you could present the young fella, we can get this cleared up in a jiffy. I can't present him, said Elodie, sighing as hard like she wouldn't present him if she could. He's at the Pearl, filling Waxman's shopping list. I don't know where the boy sleeps. Can't be getting more than 2 hours in the bunk every evening. Hooke allowed his mirror gaze to wander over Elodie's person, taking his sweet time, moving his head as well as his eyes so that she knew he was looking. Because at this point, he was pretty sure that his chances of getting his hand on a person legitimately were pretty much 0. But he gave it one more try. Maybe I could come by later and catch up with that boy. Maybe bring a bottle of that sparkling wine you like. Elodie rubbed her neck. I can't, Constable. I'm on the late shift all summer. We need the money. Lord knows we do. Well now, thought Hooke, there's the clincher. He considered smashing the wayfarers off his own face then, letting this no-nonsense Cajun see exactly what she was turning down, how her life was hanging by a thread every time they spoke. Take off the sunglasses, 1 hand around her throat, walk her backwards into the house. Wasn't no one around to see. The kid was on the clock. But that didn't solve his problem. There was someone out there, maybe with a video of him slitting Carnahan's belly, but at the very least an eyewitness. And even then, after that problem was solved, he had Connie's empire to deal with. It had to be done clever. He flashed back on 99 Rack, sitting on a breeze block beside an oil drum fire, and Colonel Faraji showing him a stump of cracked wood before he tossed into the flames. Do you see this piece of wood, Regents, my friend? I see it, Colonel, Hooke had said, and I believe there's more to it than wood. I bet nature's teaching me a lesson I ain't understood yet. Faraji's smile was pained but indulgent. He never had a son who would listen to the lessons passed down through the generations, so Hooke would have to do. This wood is split and weakened. Good for nothing but the fire. How did this happen? Fuck knows, said Hooke. How would you destroy this piece of wood? Hooke's patience was wearing thin. Faraji never came out and said stuff. There was always the big build-up. I guess I would take an axe to it. And how would the wood feel as the axe come down? Sometimes Hooke felt like he was being trained by Yoda. I guess the wood would be shit its wooden trunks. Exactly, said Faraji. So we must take our cue into the desert from the desert moisture, sleep into the wood as a friend, then freeze in the night and split the wood. Fight from the inside is what you're saying. Exactly, my friend, said Faraji. And even as the wood lay dying, it would not blame the water. Fight from the inside, thought Hooke now. Be a friend to all, until the time comes to stop being a friend. He flashed Illyria a smile that was broader than it was deep. Hey, you can't blame a fella for asking, right? He slid a card from his breast pocket and proffered it to Lily, like he pulled it from behind her ear, magician style. Ask Squib to give me a call when you see him. It ain't nothing serious, but I do want to hear from you, okay? Lily took the card, careful to not make fingertip contact. I surely will tell him, Constable. Hooke adopted a joking southern drawl. Don't make me come back now, here? I hear ya, said Elodie, in unconvincing good sport. Hooke tapped his brim. Ma'am, he said, and returned to the Chevy, leaving Elodie shivering in the thump of 90-degree Louisiana heat. The Hooke-Moreau hookup was never going to happen now, and they both knew it. But, thought Hooke as he climbed into his vehicle, there is surely more than one way to skin a Cajun.